of the sleep series. I'll be keeping you company with soft spoken and whispered reading. As you settle in for sleep, or relaxation. You get to pick your pathway through the experience. I'll be sharing works that are in the public domain for our reading, written long enough ago that they can be shared freely. I found 2 volumes of Kipling's work that were published in 1909. I'm very excited to share them with you. I found them in an antique shop, which was quite fun. And it felt like the perfect way to kick off the sleep series that I've been considering doing for a while. But before we begin, I do want to make a note that these books were published in 1909 and they reflect the perspectives and attitudes of that era. I'm discovering Kipling's works along with you. I'm not familiar with him, so I will be reading them as they were written and let the story drift softly around us. The first one I'll be reading is from volume 1 of Kipling's works, and it is titled Lispeth. Let the words gently meet you as you settle in for sleep or relaxation. Let's open the book and begin. Lispeth. The quote before the story reads as this: "Look, you have cast out love. What gods are these? You bid me please. The 3 in 1 and 1 in 3. Not so. To my own gods I go. It may be they shall give me greater ease than your cold Christ and tangled trinities." The Convert. She was the daughter of Sanu, a hillman of the Himalayas, and Jade, his wife. One year their maize failed, and 2 bears spent the night in their only opium poppy field just above the Sutlej Valley on the Khatgar side. So next season they turned Christian and brought their baby to the mission to be baptized. The
Khotgar chaplain christened her Elizabeth and Lispeth in the Hill or Pahari pronunciation. Later, cholera came to the Khotgar Valley and carried off Sanu and Jade, and Lispeth became half servant, half companion to the wife of the then chaplain of Khotgar. This was after the reign of the Moravian missionaries in that place, but before Khotgar had quite forgotten her title of Mistress of the Northern Hills. Whether Christianity improved Lispeth, or whether the gods of her own people would have done as much for her under any circumstance, I do not know. But she grew very lovely. When a hill girl grows lovely, she is worth traveling 50 miles over bad ground to look upon. Lispeth had a Greek face, one of those faces people paint so often and see so seldom. She was of a pale ivory color, and for her race, extremely tall. Also, she possessed eyes that were wonderful, and had she not been dressed in the abominable print clothes affected by missions, you would, meeting her on the hillside unexpectedly, have thought her the original Diana of the Romans going out to slay. Lispeth took to Christianity readily and did not abandon it when she reached womanhood, as do some hill girls. Her own people hated her because she had, they said, become a white woman and washed herself daily. And the chaplain's wife did not know what to do with her. One cannot ask a stately goddess, 5'10" in her shoes, to clean plates and dishes. She played with the chaplain's children and took Sunday classes in the Sunday school and read all the books in the house and grew more and more beautiful, like the princesses in fairy tales. The chaplain's wife said that the girl ought to take service in Shimla as a nurse or something genteel. But Lispeth did not want to take service. She was very happy where she was. When travelers, there were not many in those years, came into Khotgar, Lispeth used to lock herself in her own room for fear that they may take her away to Shimla or out into the unknown known world. One day, a few months after she was 17 years old, Lispeth went out for a walk. She did not walk in the manner of English ladies, a mile and a half out with a carriage ride back again. She covered between 20 and 30 miles in her little constitutionals, all about and about between Khatgar and Narkunda. This time, she came back at full dusk, stepping down the breakneck descent into Khatgar with something heavy in her arms. The chaplain's wife was dozing in the drawing room when Lispeth came in, breathing heavily and very exhausted with her burden. Lispeth put it down on the sofa and said simply, "This is my husband. I found him on the Baki Road. He has hurt himself. We will nurse him, and when he is well, your husband shall marry him to me." This was the first mention Lispeth had ever made of her matrimonial views, and the chaplain's wife shrieked in horror. However, the man on the sofa needed attention first. This was a young Englishman. His head had been cut to the bone by something jagged. Lispeth said she had found him down the hillside and had brought him in. He was breathing queerly and was unconscious. He was put to bed and tended by the chaplain, who knew something of medicine, and Lispeth waited outside the door in case she could be useful. She explained to the chaplain that this was the man she meant to marry, and the chaplain and his wife lectured her severely on the impropriety of her conduct. Lispeth listened quietly and repeated her first proposition. It takes a great deal of Christianity to wipe out uncivilized Eastern instincts, such as falling in love at first sight. Lispeth, having found the man she worshipped, did not see why she should keep silent as to her choice. She had no intention of being sent away either. She was going to nurse that Englishman until he was well enough to marry her. This was her program. After a fortnight of slight fever and inflammation, the Englishman recovered coherence and thanked the chaplain and his wife, and Lispeth, especially Lispeth, for her kindness. He was a traveler in the East, he said. They never talked about globetrotters in those days when the P&O fleet was young and small, and had come from Dara Dune to hunt for plants and butterflies among the Shimla hills. No one at Shimla, therefore, knew anything about him. He fancied that he must have fallen over a cliff while reaching out for a fern on a rotten tree trunk, and that his coolies must have stolen his baggage and fled. He thought he would go back to Shimla when he was a little stronger. He desired no more mountaineering. He made small haste to go away and recovered his strength slowly. Lispeth objected to being advised either by the chaplain or his wife. Therefore, the latter spoke to the Englishman and told him how matters stood in Lispeth's heart. He laughed a good deal and said it was very pretty and romantic, but as he was engaged to a girl at home, he fancied that nothing would happen. Certainly, he would behave with discretion. He did that. Still, he found it very pleasant to talk with Lispeth and walk with Lispeth and say nice things to her and call her pet names while he was getting strong enough to go away. It meant nothing to him at all, and everything in the world to Lispeth. She was very happy while the fortnight lasted, because she had found a man to love. Being a savage by birth, she took no trouble to hide her feelings, and the Englishman was amused. When he went away, Lispeth walked with him up the hill as far as Narkunda, very troubled and very miserable. The chaplain's wife, being a good Christian and disliking anything in the shape of fuss or scandal, Lispeth was beyond her management entirely, had told the Englishman to tell Lispeth that he was coming back to marry her. She is but a child, you know, and I fear the heart a heathen, said the chaplain's wife. So all the 12 miles up the hill, the Englishman, with his arm round Lispeth's waist, was assuring the girl that he would come back and marry her. And Lispeth made him promise over and over again. She wept on the Nakunda Ridge till he had passed out of sight along the Mutiani path. Then she dried her tears and went into Khatgar again and said to the chaplain's wife, "He will come back and marry me. He has gone to his own people to tell them so." And the chaplain's wife soothed Lispeth and said, "He will come back. At the end of 2 months, Lispeth grew impatient and was told that the Englishman had gone over the seas to England. She knew where England was because she had read the little geography primers, but of course she had no conception of the nature of the sea, being a hill girl. There was an old puzzle map of the world in the house. Lispeth played with it when she was a child. She unearthed it again and put it together of evenings and cried to herself and tried to imagine where her Englishman was. As she had no ideas of distance or steamboats, her notions were somewhat wild. It would not have made the least difference had she been perfectly correct, for the Englishman had no intention of coming back to marry a hill girl. He forgot about her by the time he was butterfly hunting in Assam. He wrote a book on the East afterward. Lispeth's name did not appear there. At the end of 3 months, Lispeth made daily pilgrimage to Narkanda to see if her Englishman was coming along the road. It gave her comfort, and the chaplain's wife, finding her happier, thought that she was getting over the barbarous and most indelicate folly. A little later, the walks ceased to help Lispeth, and her temper grew very bad. The chaplain's wife thought this a profitable time to let her know the real state of affairs. That the Englishman had only promised his love to keep her quiet. That he had never meant anything, and that it was wrong and improper of Lispeth to think of marrying with an Englishman who was of superior clay. Besides being promised in marriage to a girl of his own people, Lispeth said that all this was clearly impossible because he had said he loved her, and the chaplain's wife had, with her own lips, asserted that the Englishman was coming back. How can what he said and you said be untrue? Asked Lispeth. We said it as an excuse to keep you quiet, child, said the chaplain's wife. Then you have lied to me, said Lispeth. You and he. The chaplain's wife bowed her head and said nothing. Lispeth went silent too for a little time. Then she went out down the valley and returned in the dress of a hill girl, infamously dirty, but without the nose stud and earrings. She had her hair braided into the long pigtail, helped out with black thread that hill women wear.
There's a picture if you'd like to see.
I am going back to my own people, said she. You have killed Lispeth. There is only left today's daughter, the daughter of a Pahari and the servant of Tarka Devi. You are all liars, you English. By the time the chaplain's wife had recovered from the shock of the announcement that Lispeth had verted to her mother's gods, the girl had gone, and she never came back. She took to her own unclean people savagely, as if to make up the arrears of a life she had stepped out of. And, in a little time, she married a woodcutter, who beat her after the manner of Paharis, and her beauty faded soon. There is no law whereby you can account for the vagaries of the heathen, said the chaplain's wife, and I believe that Lispeth was always at heart an infidel, seeing she had been taken into the Church of England at the mature age of 5 weeks. This statement does not do credit to the chaplain's wife. Lispeth was a very old woman when she died. She had always a perfect command of English, and when she was sufficiently drunk, could sometimes be induced to tell a story of her first love affair. It was hard to realize that the bleared, wrinkled creature, exactly like a wisp of charred rag, could ever have been Lispeth of the Kotgar mission.
Please be sure to hit that like button if you've enjoyed this reading to assist you to sleep and relaxation.